Hello everybody, my name is Brian Trethewey. I am the Solutions Engineer for Prophix, and we'll be talking about Dynamics and using Prophix to automate your budget and automate your reporting processes. Just as a quick introduction, prior to coming to Prophix, I was actually a customer for 4.5 years. And I worked for Terex and Genie Industries, which you can see our product on the right there. We were a $2.1 billion segment of the global business, and with Prophix, I pulled in data from 6 ERP systems, 10 different charts of accounts, and 9 functional currencies around the globe. I used to budget, forecast, and do monthly reporting on 26 legal entities, thanks to our tax lawyers. And by the time I left, I had 96 users. I think when I took over Prophix, I had just around 20, and then we built that up over the 4.5 years I was there. And just so you know, my title was FP&A. So Prophix is intended to be used by the finance team. There's very little IT needs involved, mostly on the setup side. So everything you see and everything we talk about today, please realize that this is owned by IT, and Prophix was built by finance people for finance people. Now I'm going to go ahead and get going here, and the things I want to cover today is high level some of the fast changes that we have to deal with in the finance department nowadays, and then I want to talk about kind of overshadowing everything, how we can automate pieces and parts of that with Dynamics and Prophix. I want to show some different opportunities and, show some of the symptoms that occur with some of the ways we do business, and then how we can remedy that. Hope to spend a good portion of the time in the demo environment itself, showing you how we can automate, showing you how we can centralize our data and thus make better decisions. Then at any time during the demo, please, if you have a question, type it on in. And then once we get to a stopping point at the end, Brad will feed all those questions and we can answer them for you. So as we all know, finance, we've been asked to do more and more and more and more as the world gets smaller, as business gets faster. And we need to provide more detailed planning. We need to look at long-term strategies, not just what we're doing in the next year, but what are we doing in the next 3, 5, 20, depending on our data models. Getting a little more precise on headcount. Headcount tends to be one of the largest expenses in any company, and getting a hand on that and getting a hand around, all the pieces and moving parts. Being able to do what-if scenarios, being able to, hey, what would happen if we acquired this new business? Or what would happen, in another downturn? Could we survive it? So finance gets a lot of questions, and they get asked very, quickly. Execs wanting a quick turnaround and wanting to be able to chart the course for the company, basically. Some of the challenges in doing that and answering things quickly and coming up with this analysis is, there's not a lot of integration between systems. So even though, you're on one of the Dynamics ERP systems, you might have other data out in, say, Salesforce, or out in one of the HRIS systems, or up in a payroll system. So getting everything together and centralized can be difficult. And there's limited solutions out there in order to create business models, in order to take a piece of your business and model it. Like, I want to focus just on revenue, and I want to figure out, okay, what's my revenue looking like, rolling forward. And what happens is we tend to focus on Excel to solve these problems. All the ERPs have Excel add-ins, and we've all used multiple of them to get data in Excel, and we start turning to Excel to build models, and we start turning to Excel for these creative reports that we need to come up with. And the problem with that is the limitations of Excel. So some of the things that we can do to help out by moving things out of Excel, by moving it into a more dynamic CPM solution like Prophix, is we can automate your reporting. You can have confidence in the numbers you're reporting. One of the benefits of pulling your data from multiple systems into Prophix is once we verify that we're pulling the right data, you can have confidence that it's always going to be the same. And we have ways to check. So if you do have changes in your GL string, we do have ways to check that data coming into Prophix and make sure everything's accurate. But when it comes to reporting itself, once you build your set of reports and get everything set up and looking the way you want, with our automation process and our ability to update in our security overview that we have within, running budgets becomes a quick rinse and repeat operation. It goes from hours to days, which a lot of my customers have talked about, down to a very short amount of time. I was able to distribute around the world a packet of about 12 reports to those 96 users in roughly 45 minutes. So, and the update of that, and I'll show that when we get into Prophix. Budgeting, instead of spreadsheets, or instead of sending spreadsheets out to get feedback back in, and all the complications of that, row shifting, references, version control, the Excel pain from that. With Prophix, you can have controlled multi-user collaboration. You have that one source of truth like we were talking about, but now you're sending out from Prophix to get data back from people, and the application itself is controlling those versions, is controlling the way that the data is brought in. You have accept and reject cycles. Also forecasting. And I'm getting some feedback. Someone just dialed in. Thank you very much. Forecasting is another thing. I've got a lot of customers who start out with just budgeting. And because the budget cycle takes so long, they have a tough time reacting when there's material changes in any given month or quarter. So by automating, the forecast and being able to do quarterly or a rolling 12 or a monthly, we can automate a lot of those processes. Leaves you time to just take those material changes and apply that impact to your financial statements and see how that affects you rolling forward. So difficulties in reporting, key metrics were calculated offline within Excel, time-consuming writing reports by system administrators, and to this day I also hear a lot about we have IT create our reports for us and the turnaround time with that. Offline forecasting, is only done at a high level because of that. Formula errors, budgeting Excel means, all those chances. I don't mind row shifts so much. I don't mind deleting a formula so much. The one that always bit me was if somebody changed a reference point. So I had a number in there and it looked legit, but it was referencing the wrong thing. That one bit me hard a couple times using Excel. And, looking at your growth, being able to dynamically add any changes. So if you hire something new, a new department or a new line of business or a new partner, being able to dynamically enter that and have that automatically flow through your reports is another benefit. So reduce reporting and planning cycle time, definitely give you time right back right there. When you get asked for questions, being able to quickly give a response because all your data is in one place. Being able to reconcile data quickly, building tools in Prophix to check the data and make sure everything is accurate. The confidence of having one version of the truth. The predictive analytics, being able to look forward and being able to really drill down into different models of your business. It was a huge lesson for me going to one of the user conferences is more smaller models for different aspects of your business. I met a lady at a user conference who had 22 working models inside Prophix. One of them was just for copper prices. So being able to zero in on your product and your customers. I'm currently working on a customer level cash forecast for credit accounts based on DSO calculations, days sales outstanding. So calculating that by the customer, then looking forward with those metrics based on their revenue projections, and then building that into a direct cash flow and seeing what cash is going to come in on a monthly basis. Being able to do that is huge. And what happens is, the way I look at it is, when I started out, we were in FP&R, financial planning and reporting, which means we were always reacting to data. Once we got Prophix up and running, and once we were able to utilize and be comfortable, we became more FP&A. We were able to put the analysis back into our job description, and that was a big win for us. This slide here is a CPM maturity model, and this was built by Gartner to show growth and adoption of CPM application. What I found really cool about this is this mimicked my growth with Prophix, when I took it over to when I left 4.5 years later. And reporting, budgeting, and forecasting, those are the low-hanging fruits, the things that are so easy to improve, to give you time back, to give you better analysis. This tends to be where most of my customers start. Then we start looking at different types of analysis. We look at different types of cash flow planning. I was able to bring in operational data. We were lean manufacturing, and they didn't really have a place to store their metrics. They were doing it on Excel. So we loaded it into Prophix, and then we used Prophix to aggregate it and report up the line, throughout the day. Strategic planning, we were great in several of our projects to look forward. Financial consolidations, FX, all easily handled. And the more you build in Prophix, the more value there is to the business, because all of these pieces now integrate. They're all in one place with all that data in the same place. I was even able to bring in third-party market share data from a stats company and integrate that into Prophix, and then use that to compare against my revenue by month by state. So, hey, market share grew, we didn't, but yet we had these sales, what did we miss? Or market share grew, we had no sales, what do we need to look at? Or just the assurance that, hey, market share grew and we had a majority of that growth. So bringing in disparate data and being able to analyze in more creative ways. So a little bit about Prophix and Microsoft Dynamics, and very seamless integration. We're both built on SQL Server stack. We're both built and use Microsoft technology, and Microsoft uses us in several places here in Redmond, where I live, right inside Microsoft itself. Even though, they build the foundation for us, they use our software as well. I know they use it in their call center, and I also know they use it in their maintenance and facilities planning. So a nice full circle with that. So what's really cool is all of these dynamics, GP especially, feed directly into Prophix through SQL Server. And then we can use that to consolidate that data, put it into different models, and then we can disseminate that data, in many different ways, from the web client, through the Excel browser, through the Excel add-in. We can even go straight to SharePoint. And actually, this slide right here shows it a little bit better. So we have our source systems in red, and we can pull flat files. We've pulled from over 300 different systems with Dynamics, the Dynamics family being the easiest to pull in from. We create the models, then we create our reports and our dashboards, and because of this connection, because we're on the same type of software, we load here at a trial balance level, but we're able to drill back to your source data to get transactional level details, and I'll be showing you that momentarily. And then, of course, we can output into different types of presentations, SharePoint reports, Excel, PDF, PowerPoint, all easily handled. All right, I'm going to click over here into my demo environment. Okay, good. And welcome to Prophix 12. The landing page for Prophix 12 is a dashboard. And what's really cool about this is you can have one dashboard for your entire company or a dashboard for individual groups, different lines of businesses, different departments, or I had it for different geographies. So I had Australia, Europe, China, South America, and the US. So each one had their own dashboard. And any of the metrics that you need to look at can be put on here. You can also change your dashboard based on like what a CEO in your company would want to see versus what finance wants to see versus what your budget managers want to see. Obviously, the budget managers are just going to want to get in, get you the data you need, and get out. So keeping it very simple. Finance monitoring the health of your budgets, your forecasts, and any serious anomalies. CEOs giving them the information they need to be able to direct. And everything on here, as we're going through it, is fully interactive. You know, we can drill down into more detail. We can drill up to look at a higher level. And that's really cool because one of the main things you want to do is look for those anomalies. Look for things that are exceptions and build your dashboards so you can do that. On the top right is my tasks. I'll come back to that because that's part of the automation of the budget. You know, top 5 customers, top 5 products, top 5 accounts, and by that is not such a good thing, but say the accounts with the top variance. So I can look into which accounts were not budgeted the best and which department that was. So I, as an FP&A person, I can focus in on the accounts with the most variance and figure out what's going on to streamline. You know, any sort of KPI you need to measure, you know, for your business, whether it's working capital, turns, you know, miles driven, containers shipped, you know, pounds produced, anything that you need, you could pull up here to look at. My favorites is just a simple place for you to park things that you work on very, you know, the most frequently. So you can quickly access your work and just go straight to it. A couple ideas down here on the side, Speedo, you know, column charts, field charts. We also have sales funnels, thermos. So, you know, anything that helps get the information across to your people. Now, one of the things I want to show that we talked about on an earlier slide is I want to talk about drilling down into your data and being able to look at the transactions. And as you can see here with the department's expense report, you can see marketing has some negative variance. Well, I can drill down a level, and that'll drill me into marketing where I can see product marketing has it. But it's really not telling me much about the accounts. It's not telling me, you know, anything other than, hey, you really need to investigate this further. And what's really cool is I can go one step back to the report that we used to build the graphic, and I can take a look at the report and say, okay, look, I've got, you know, in travel costs, my eye comes right to, you know, the graph where I've overspent on travel. And also, you know, even more so to the point, we can see where our conditional formatting has, you know, brought it to our attention. Now, if we think about this real quick, you know, here I was talking about difficulties with Excel earlier, but what do I have? I have a column chart, I have a data table, and I have conditional formatting. I'm working in an Excel environment. The difference being is we have Excel internal to Prophix, okay? So being internal to Prophix, that means I can keep all my calculations centralized. I can keep all my information centralized. So it can be pulled up by multiple people in multiple ways. Notice you see absolutely no calculations coming up anywhere for this variance. So anytime I increase my actuals, and if you think about month end where you could reload your actuals 2, 3, 4 times during the day, depending on your accounting cycle, every time you update those actuals, this variance is automatically updated because the calculation is stored centrally. So anytime you open or refresh, if you already have it open, a report, that number is automatically updated. So instead of your report being a point of calculation, it becomes a window into your data. So whenever you open up a report, everything is right there. It's faster. You don't have to worry about manipulating rows. You don't have to worry about version control because it's all stored centrally. Now, another thing that's stored centrally is comments, and you can see a manager has already made a comment on why is this so high. And I'll show you how comments being stored centrally is beneficial as I go forward. So now we know it's T&E, and we know in the back of our head that, it's, product marketing. But I can go a little bit deeper, and I'm actually into the data view part of Prophix where we can do ad hoc queries. So this is the part where I am interacting directly with Prophix in the central database. First and foremost, notice that message is still there, okay? So even though I'm in two different parts of the application, my comments come through. So you can actually have entire conversations on here to substantiate the numbers and the changes in your explanations. Now, very quickly, I'm sure most of you are familiar with dimensions, but I want to make sure that we talk a little bit so I know everybody's on the same page. A dimension inside of CPM is a description of your data. Okay, so any way that we want to slice, dice, or look at your data, we need to have a dimension for that. In this case, I have a dimension for version, my actual, my plan, and the variance. Over here, I have a dimension for accounts. With that plus sign, it tells me it's a summary level account, which means those natural level GP accounts are below it. Okay? Also, off to the side here, we have our organization. So I could choose which department of marketing to view and scroll through that. We have our time, because we always want to look at things with time. Reporting currency. If anybody out there has multiple currencies that you need to report with, Prophix handles it seamlessly and very easily. And the last is time perspective. So this is month-to-date, year-to-date, trailing 12-month, any of the time summaries that you need to use for your calculations or your views. And you can add other dimensions, depending on what you need. A customer dimension, a product dimension, whatever it is you need to look at your data. And that's another thing to point out real quick. Prophix isn't limited by number of dimensions. If it makes business sense for you to have that dimension in there for you to analyze and look forward in your business, we can put it in Prophix. We're not restricted to 8 or 9 dimensions. So now, I've got a nice comparative here. And really quickly, I'm going to do a drag and drop. And I now have a trend analysis. I'm going to concentrate on T&E because I know that's where the variance was. And we can see the natural level accounts below it where we've got lodging and airfare are the heavy hitters for January that we were looking at. Well, we kind of remember from the dashboard that, it was done in product marketing, but I really want to see that. But instead of just clicking through this, I want to see it all together. So I'm going to grab my organization and let's look at airfare. I'm going to drop it right on top. And very quickly, we now have an airfare report for marketing through time. And if you need to make this into a report that you need to distribute on a monthly basis, this is your starting point for doing that. And like I said, we load at trial balance level. But let's say we want to go a little bit deeper. I can actually go right back over to any of the Dynamics groups with a small query back against the connection, and I can see internally what the transactions were. This is the query that's made by Prophix. You can only drill across into data that you're allowed to see in Prophix. So if you're not allowed to see, say, headcount data or salary data, you will not be able to go there inside Prophix. Security covers that. But as we can see with value, there's a heavy hitter there. There's 15K. And then we can go to wherever we've saved that invoice from, and we can see that 6 people took a flight, to a conference. Think about that. Even with my explaining the mechanics, even with my explaining the steps I was taking, we went straight from a dashboard variance all the way down to looking at an invoice for the transaction. This saved so much time. This allowed much clearer communication. I could call product marketing and say, hey, I see you guys took a trip. 6 of you went. There's only 10 of you in the department. What did you go for, and do I need to budget for this in the future? So you can have very clear, very concise conversations with this. Now, for the sake of our conversation, I'm going to say yes, we're going to budget for that. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to update a budget. Now, the first piece I want to talk about is the automation piece of the budget. Okay, there's 2 ways of looking at our workflow. There's what you're going to set up in finance and the way you set up your workflow to automate your repetitive tasks. And then there's the view of your budget manager. This is the person who you want to fill out a template to give you data. And to start out with, we'll go right into workflow, and these are the different tasks that you need to do for your budget. Everyone's is different, understood, but here I want to review my data. Then I want to distribute all these different templates, one for OpEx, one for personnel, and one for revenue. That's pretty much what's going to hit everybody's department. When it's done, I need to make some allocations. Then I want to distribute some reports to show impact. Then I want to go back in and I want to look at optimizing revenue and then plan for CapEx and then work that into a forecast. So any of the steps that you do, you can put in here. And what's cool about it is you can assign it to different people. You can have a due date. You can say who's going to, go down here, here's the template we're going to send out. Here's when it's due, and once it gets close to that due date, within a few days, you can send out emails twice a day. Once it's hit the due date, you can send out emails every hour. You can really annoy the folks who haven't given you the data. What can approvers do? Do they just reject? Can they make changes? And all this is stored in here, and it's automated. An easier way to look at it is via the flow chart. So here's where I start. I've reviewed my data, so I've clicked that off. Now it's distributed these 3 templates for people to fill out, and these will also change color as they get closer to the due date or go past. The second side of this is my tasks. This is what your department managers, your budget managers see when it's time for them to give you data for month end, for a budget, or for a forecast. So once you hit that start button, it automatically shows up under my task, and they know that I have to do my OpEx, my personnel planning, my sales planning, and some CapEx information, and here's when it's due. Taken completely off your hands. You don't have to remind them. It's right there. And with a simple click, they can open the templates that they need to fill out. Sorry about that. So what we have here, the yellow is where I can hand enter data. The white is where I'm pulling data from another model. This is the personnel model. And then the gray is just a summary level. And as you can see down here, I've had somebody already reply to Alfred Perry, and they're saying, hey, the reason this is high is because we went to a new conference. And one of the other things I would really like to show here on the comments is we can have entire conversations in there. I can also attach documents. So, we're talking about speeding up your budgeting process and your reporting process. Something substantial has happened and you want to see what's going on. You can attach supportive documentation to it. So let's say you came up with a great way to reconcile that account. You could attach, how you did it in here. A post-closing journal entry can be added here. Accounting change can be documented here, by attaching a Word doc. So all of this, helps you in the next cycle know what happened last year and be able to find out why you made changes, who made the changes, and be able to evaluate what worked. So it's a great communication tool. Also, big news coming out here in the next few weeks, we're going to have line item notes. So we can put notes by account, and we're also going to have page notes. So if you have a common report, you can put a whole set of notes on the bottom of that page, and it'll show up to anybody who pulls that combination of accounts. Huge, huge, huge. Allows you to give more detail and have it available in the future. I also found that this was available and that this was nice for folks who were training. They could go back through the notes, and you can do a report with notes as well. So notice here last year we thought that the forecast would end in 199,000. Let's say I believe that, I'm only at 85K for the year. So I believe that number. I want to increase this to 100,000. Okay. Prophix stops me and says, hey, Brian, you got 12 months in that year. How do you want to spread the data? And this is great because if you enter data at too high of a level above your natural level, you want it to warn you. So if I were to enter something under travel, I don't want to spread it across everything below it. I probably meant to enter it into meals or entertainment or airfare. So it gives you a great stop. I can spread it evenly. Only done that with new data. I can spread based on existing data, which captures the seasonality, which is what I normally do. But we can also spread data based on member property values. We can spread data based on information in other dimensions. This comes in handy for those what-if scenarios we talked about earlier. So I want to acquire, a new business. What's the impact going to be? Well, I can start a new version, of the budget, and I can transfer my revenue over. Well, with this new division or this new acquisition, I'm going to increase my revenue by 3%. I'm going to increase different expenses by different percentages. And you can automate that, taking your existing budget. You can tell Prophix what you want to increase by how much, and you can send that over to your new version. And suddenly you're going to have a new version with your new acquisition that you can compare and contrast against. And, say, okay, is this a good idea? Look at the impact. The other thing is for allocation. Anybody who does a lot of allocations and has different drivers, I could use, for my IT, I could use headcount because everybody's got a laptop, so I could take my IT and allocate that based on headcount. I could take my different lines of manufacturing and I could allocate rent to them based on square footage that each line takes up. Any driver you come up with can be stored or created inside Prophix. And then you couple that on top of the workflow that I showed you. Think of that flow chart showing each step of that allocation. Now you have a very transparent process that's, very precise and duplicatable. And for me personally, it was really nice to be able to show the auditor, here's our allocation process. And, just get that signed off, very quickly. So here I'm just going to say yes, and you can see that Prophix sorry, I seem to have a bit of lag in my looks like it's finally gone. You can see how that updated to 8K. So everything is proportionally increased, so it adds up to 100,000. So another item in a budget that helps, for the automation, instead of sending out worksheets, I can have line item detail. If I try to enter here, it stops me because it wants me to add line item detail. So when you want some detail below a line and you want people to roll it up and give you some detail, you can force them to enter it here. So where am I flying, why am I flying, and what's the charts? You can use this for any account. You can turn it on or turn it off as needed. So another way, and this can roll forward as well. Okay, the next piece I want to get into here is I'm going to go into driver base. So let's talk about revenue real quick. And then once we're done with that, I'm going to go into reporting and talk a lot deeper about how we can automate and how security impacts reporting. So everybody always asks when it's coming to time to do revenue planning, when it's time to look at, what we're expecting to sell. Everybody uses some sort of driver. Everybody uses some sort of, KPI in order to determine what the revenue is going to look like. And then a lot of times they'll base some of the expenses on a percentage of that revenue. All of those drivers are easily stored in Prophix. So here, again, I come from manufacturing, so I'm using a manufacturing view, but this would be the same for a service industry. This would, billable hours versus distribution or warehousing. Everybody has their own drivers. So if you think in your business what your driver would be, for me it was average sales price. Now, I would start out with calculating average sales price based on my historical actuals. Then I would be giving a report on that to my executives. And what they would do is they would determine, out of our contracts with our largest customers, what they thought they would be paying with their discounts, what they thought they would get out of a price hike, how sticky is the market right now. And they would come back to me with what they wanted the average sales price to be, what they thought reality was. So I would then go in and I would plug in the ASP for all my different products. Average material cost, we would start out with our BOM of materials. I could port that over from my engineering system and then have that roll up to my average material cost, because my lines didn't produce just one thing, they produced a variety of things. So I would average that out. Labor and overhead can also easily be added on. And what's really nice is once you've got everything in, you can send this out to, the folks who need to tell you what you're going to sell, your sales department or your sales and operational planning team. And very quickly, they can take the information you have them based on historicals, and they can now go through and streamline your revenue for what they see with their constraints. And everything very quickly updates, and you can see gross margin, you can see everything rolled right on down. So, this automates and quickens the decision process. You send this out to everybody, they type in the data they want, and you get the results back very quickly. So the last thing I want to show here is what we call a report binder. Okay? So I can bring in a lot of different information in here, and I can put it together for our reports. I know the quarterly reports tend to be fancier than the monthly reports, reports, or you have a large binder for the budget, especially we did, reporting up to Prophix, we'd have a full deck that we would produce each time. Now, you can have Word documents in here. You can have PowerPoint documents for slides. So you can have a nice cover sheet. Another use for the Word documents is you can have your executive summary or your narrative in there. So what's cool about that, again, sharing that whole Microsoft environment, is we have a Prophix for Excel add-in. Now what I can do is I can pull forward my month-end, my quarterly, or my budgeting data into Excel, and I can use that. So we increased 4%, from $5 million to $5,200,000. That would be 20%, sorry. And you can actually have those numbers right inside your Word doc. You can also attach the graphs right inside your Word doc. So when you update Prophix, the verbiage and the graphs automatically update, as well as PowerPoint slides. And so this can be loaded back in, so your Word doc matches exactly what you're looking at. Then notice I have 5, items in my financial package here. So the cool part, 2 things that just make this so wonderful, is first and foremost security. Okay, so I used to segregate my reports based on geography. So with security, we would come through and we would see whoever the first group is on the distribution list. In this case, it's the executives. So the executives would each get the full report. I had nothing out of there. They were able to see everything. Say the next group I would add, might be David, and David works out of Australia. So I would add him, and he would get, when it came up to his turn to get his reports, because he was in Australia, he would see a shorter report because there was no manufacturing back there. So because in security I set him up to just what was in his region, he would get a shorter report that just showed all the expenses and the revenue that they brought in. All of this is easily entered and easily controlled. So the next group might be UK. So over in the UK, they've got some manufacturing, they get a slightly larger report. You can zero in security to where you could have one person see one account in one region for 1 month. And you can also update security by groups, by position, by line of business, by geography. All very easily handled. And every time you run a report, it filters through security before it goes out. So they can't see anything you don't want them to see. Now, the second thing that really took and gave me time back is name sets. So inside Prophix, I changed one name set. So we're at the end of June now. So July 1st, I would change my name set from May to June. So now, anytime I pull a report, it's going to show June actuals instead of May actuals. It's going to show June prior year instead of May prior year, and it's going to show my newest forecast or my updated budget for that month. So with 2 very simple items, security and name sets, all these reports become nothing more than rinse and repeat. Once in 4.5 years, I had to update my reports, and it was due to a major accounting change. We took something from below the line to up above OP to where it would impact it. So that's the only time I had to touch my reports in 4.5 years. Let me tell you, that was really nice compared to some of the other places where I had to generate the reports, create them in, Excel, and then create the slides, manipulate the charts, attach it. I mean, having everything here centrally sure helped a lot. So one of the things on Dynamics, just so you know, we have over 465 customers that use Dynamics. And as you can see, the lion's share being GP. We hook to GP so quickly, so easily. the tables haven't changed in a lot of years. Also, on top of this, a second is the new D365, which came out. We do have the ability to connect to that as well. So I'm not certain if anybody switched over to it yet or not, but I do know we can connect to D365, which is their online version. So in summary, single unified solution. As I grew with Prophix, everything was there that I needed when I needed it. So you don't have to buy different modules. You don't have to worry about it just being reporting or just being budgeting. We offer everything you've seen and then some. If you can imagine it, you can probably build it in Prophix, if it has to do with finance and forecasting. So that was always, it's a solid tool. I built new tools inside Prophix in order to report up to corporate quicker. Corporate used Hyperion. I know for a fact I had to pay for an upload and a download license. And Hyperion was clunky, which is why we went to Prophix in the first place. But I built a spreadsheet where one page was Prophix, one page was the Hyperion, Excel add-in, and then I set it up to where they talk to each other, and I used that to load into Hyperion, instead of some of the longer, more, tedious ways of doing it. So being able to load back into systems can be done. The direct integration, the ability to drill back, not having to rely on IT. Basically, the only times I had to bug IT was if there was an update that I wanted them to perform. I would do the updates on our test server, and IT would do the updates on our prod server because of control management. Which brings us to actually the last bullet point on there, which is actually very important. Prophix now offers choice. We can deploy on your servers behind your firewalls, and there are some industries that require that, and I've done that recently as well. So we can still, deploy on-prem. It looks exactly like what you saw. We can deploy on your hosted IT cloud. So if you're a smaller company and you've got a hosted cloud, whether it's on Azure or something else, we can deploy there. We also offer software as a service. So we can become your Prophix IT team. We can help with all of that. And we are on top of Amazon Web Services. And our security and our web security clearance and certifications are amazing. I'm very impressed with that team and what they do. Another thing about that deployment is we offer single tenancy. We are not group tenancy like most of the others. So you get your own environment on AWS and nobody else shares any of that data anywhere. So multiple avenues of deployment, so very easily handled there. And now it is up to all of you. I tried to save some time here for any questions. So please, anything that I talked about during the time, please fire it over. Brad, your show, sir.
Hey, Brian, thank you. We did get one question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you add a comment to an account on one report, does that comment flow through to other reports?
Absolutely.
Also, how long do comments last? Do they pull forward from fiscal year to fiscal year, or do they stay with the current year?
So the first one is absolutely. So any report where you have the same dimensions, okay? So if I open a different report and it has the same dimensions in it, so I'm looking at, in our case, in our story, we were looking at product marketing. If I open product marketing on a different report and it has travel expense on there, those notes we put in would absolutely show up, okay? So no problem there at all. You also notice that it doesn't have to be just another report. If somebody is making an ad hoc query inside Prophix and they're trying to find a discrepancy, and they pull up product marketing, January, airfare, they're going to see that note in the ad hoc view as well. So wherever you have that confluence of dimensions, that comment is going to show up. They don't go away. It is stored in the current year and time that you have it in. However, you know, you can move them forward if you need to. Never really done that, actually. I've only looked in the past and said, okay, this is what happened last year. And yeah, I might have made myself a note as to watch out for a certain amount, but I can actually see where that would be beneficial. That's actually a really good idea that I had not thought of. Thank you for that. I would just print out the report of last year's comments, and then I would just have that around. So, learn something new every day. Thank you.
Okay, great. It looks like that's it for the questions right now. But Brian, if you had anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up, feel free.
One of the things I did not show that might be very important, especially for GP and the Dynamics users, is we have a part of Prophix called Detailed Planning Manager. And this allows us to do heavier modeling than what I showed you. So we can handle personnel planning, we can handle capital expenditures, we can handle commission structures, impact both your balance sheet and your income statement and your direct cash flow statement. So if you think about projects that hits all three areas, you know, in Detailed Planning Manager, you can get very, very nitty-gritty on very heavy-duty modeling. And personnel planning is a perfect example. Anybody who's done that in Excel or just used a payroll app knows that getting that stuff centralized and being able to plan via headcount, and very often I get asked to plan via employee. So in a lot of cases, they'll want to see their OPEX for their cost center, but they'll want a list of the employees in that cost center so they know if that if they've got the right group of people is, being reported to correctly. So that's another avenue that's very powerful in Prophix to get very detailed on your modeling.